have never failed. I have turned all of my failures into wins. And it wasn't by accident. That wasn't by accident. That was by design. And that was through the design and the formulas and the strategies that I created. And sometimes with Reggie, to piggyback off Reggie, he said something about patience. That does mean patience.
Yes.
Black butterflies, so y'all know, Black Butterflies took 3 years to become Black Butterflies. I wrote that film over 3 times and revised it almost over 20. That was the Black Butterflies y'all see now was not the Black Butterflies that it was when it was just an idea.
Yeah.
But it started with a small goal. Oh, I just want to get in a Tribeca. I just want to get a grant, you know, something quick to make. And then it became one of those things like, oh, y'all deny me? Oh, now I got to prove to y'all that y'all were supposed to give me this money. And I'm very competitive, so yeah.
Hey, y'all. Welcome to Inside Out Podcast Season 2. I'm your host, Yamoria Wright. The intention of this podcast is to enrich your life with behind-the-scenes interviews and conversations from thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and creators about how they live their lives from the inside out. Enjoy. What's up, y'all? Welcome to the new episode of Inside Out Podcast featuring Tamara S. Hall. What's up, Tamara?
What's up?
Thank you for being here. And wait, y'all, before we even get started, make sure you subscribe to Inside Out Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Please leave a comment. Let us, don't just think the thoughts, share the thoughts. You know, I'll comment back. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Audible, also please follow. I will thank you, and I will also comment back if you comment, okay? So interact with us here at Inside Out Podcast. All right, without further ado, I will introduce to you all Tamara S. Hall. Tamara S. Hall is an award-winning director, screenwriter, actress, entrepreneur, and poet from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A graduate of the William Esper Studio, Tamara completed her studies in acting, movement, and voice and speech. She's written, produced, and starred in short films that tackle both fun and timely topics in unique, genre-bending ways, all the while centering Black women. Most recently, her horror drama short Black Butterflies premiered on BET Networks and won Best Short Screenplay in the prestigious 2022 Atlanta Film Festival, was featured on Coverfly's The Red List as the top 1% in genre format, and placed as a finalist and semifinalist in the Nashville FF Screenwriting Competition and Page International Screenwriting Awards. Her first 2 shorts, Appetizer, which featured a fully women-led crew, and A Night at the Table, her directorial debut, premiered at festivals such as Screamfest, Bronzland, Pan-African Film Festival, Axe Wound, and more during the 2019-2020 Film Festival circuit. A Night at the Table won a first-place 3-year distribution deal with Revolt TV. In 2021, Tamara was selected as one of 11 mentees for Black Boy Rights Media and Writ Large Inc.'s Talent Incubator. Before becoming a filmmaker, Tamara worked for 10 years in the TV business at renowned networks such as HBO, Comcast, and NBC Universal. Tamara's work has been covered in press such as Deadline, HuffPost, Black Talent TV, Shadow and Act, Graveyard Shift Sisters, and Black Girl Nerds. She is currently pioneering a program that will demystify the industry and teach budding filmmakers key business skills. Additionally, Tamara is developing the feature-length script to A Night at the Table, her debut horror short, and writing a poetry book dedicated to the healing and humanization of Black women. They'll never know how hard that was for me to read. They'll never know.
I need to hear it now. I'm like, I need to send her some travel photos.
Oh yeah. I'm like, I was actually
the producer and me kicked in.
Yeah, as I was reading, I was like, I ain't got all this stuff. It's a lot of stuff.
It's a little something. You know,
yeah,
it's not everything.
A lot of stuff. Hi, Tamara.
Hi.
How are you feeling today?
I am good. You know,
You're
nature
good?
wasn't on my side
this
morning.
Okay.
But you know, we're persevering.
We are
persevering
as we do. Well, nature was also. I'm in the same predicament as well, and persevering as we do.
I love how we're synced up, and
I know
live very close to each other.
I know. Was it a full moon yesterday? It was just close to one.
I was not looking, girl. I was on my couch.
I had to go get my eyebrows done, and I was driving, and it was still sunset, sunset, but the moon, the moon was just getting brighter and brighter. I'm pretty sure if it wasn't a full moon, it was an almost full moon. It was gorgeous.
Yeah.
And it was huge. And I was like, dang, I'm synced with the moon like this? I know that's right. I know it's something special. Tamara, talk us through your childhood. So Tamara and I just met, y'all. So this is February, and we just met in September, right?
Yes.
But I was even looking at some of the casting, the twins in The Night of the Table. What are their names? Lord Jesus.
Kimmy and Sarah.
Kimmy and Sarah. So Kimmy was cast in the Love My Roomie prequel short that's called It Stays Here, but we had to shut it down because of the pandemic. So I saw them. So my point is, Tamara and I have frequented the same circles, lived in New York at the same time, but it took us me moving to LA for us to meet.
And also, let's not forget another connection. I was catfished, guys, by one of her lead actors.
Yeah.
Well, I was catfished with someone portraying to be one of her lead actors.
Yes.
Here in the great Los Angeles.
Yes, that's so funny. I meant to tell him that. I'd be joking with him too. I'd be like, so. I remember when his Instagram was like he was being catfished left and right at a certain point. It was like Love My Roomie had just gone on Amazon Prime. He was being catfished left and right. But Tamara, I would consider you, now I said the same thing to Michelle A. Daniel. I consider her a little bit elusive. And I would consider you a little elusive as well. You're a little mysterious.
Really?
I do. I think now, okay, one we could go on you look adventurous on your Instagram, but when it comes to like who Tamara S. Hall is, I think you're a little mysterious. Which I think is purposeful. I think it's pretty intentional, would you say?
Well, I think it's a balance. I think my therapist often reminds me that I have one foot in the generation now and one foot in the old generation. Makes sense. And so I think with that, there's a part of me that likes to keep some of me for me. And then there's a part of me that's like, all right, now it's time to pop out. You know, 'cause I'm going to pop out. Don't let y'all forget. So I think that's what it is. There's a part of me that wants to still keep some of myself to myself. But I also think it's the artist in me. Because I think when you really truly honor the craft, you have to go in. I can't, I won't say I can't. Like, I think for me, like, I have such reverence for the artistic process that for me, I'm like, I want to honor, and sometimes that means isolating myself from the world and really like listening to the parts of me that I need to tap into to tell certain stories. So
you have to be able to hear yourself. Ashley Simpo, who was a couple of episodes ago, she had said in her interview that she grew up actually Jehovah's Witness, and she said because of the nature of just that religion, there was so much she couldn't do, and she couldn't play with certain kids, she couldn't go to certain places, certain things she couldn't do, right? But she said she learned how to hear her voice and to hear the sound of her voice, and and that really, from what I interpreted, really helped her hone in on her authorial voice as a writer. Would you say that's the same for you? What was it like growing up? Were you very mixy as a little girl, or were you kind of shy and aloof?
Well, I certainly was not shy. I am what my family would consider the star of the family.
Okay.
But not always by my own proclamation. I think it was a thing that because they saw that I was a performer. Because I have other people in my family that are just as talented. Okay. But I think because I was so young and like I wasn't just good at one thing. I was also very smart and book smart, and I was like just a high achiever. So when you add that with talent, I think people saw something in that. And so to your question, I think to be honest, I think I was a little bit of the same in terms of like having one foot in, one foot out. I mean, my cousins can testify to the fact that there were summers that I stayed in the house. Like my friends, I had male friends too at that time, like boyfriends that were not boyfriends, but
boys that were friends.
Exactly, boys that were friends, because I was a tomboy, believe it or not.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I used to play basketball, curveball, manhunt. I mean, a lot of my scar on my face was all from being a tomboy. So, a lot of people know that because they're like, oh, you're so like good. I'm like, multifaceted, I'm multidimensional. I think, people put women in a box. But
yeah, for sure.
But back to your original point, yeah, like there were summers where I just spent in the house just writing or reading or I don't know, like just being a nerd. And then there were summers where I was out like, fighting the boys. So I had a balance. But in terms of like finding my voice, I think it happened very organically. I think I needed to find a voice because so a lot of people don't know this, and so it's interesting hearing you say like there's a mystique about you, and like it's funny because we live in a time where people create personas for themselves.
Yes,
but for me it's very much like this is who you get, you know what I mean? And there are parts of me that are I'm not opposed to tapping into that, or the part of me that's exposed to people a bit more, but I'm still very strategic about it. But I think for me, like in terms of finding my voice, I had to find a voice because I grew up in a neighborhood that, you know, like we hear about urban neighborhoods like, oh, there's all of this inner city crime and all of that. And that's true. But when I was a kid, it wasn't really so much about like the prevalence of crime as much as it was like, it was a very communal space where I feel like everybody came together, and like it was, you know, I grew up in a time in the 90s where my neighbor would take us to school, right? Like you don't really see so much of that now in urban cities. I would I can't speak for like the suburbia, but you know, you don't really see communities coming together to help raise the kids, right? And so I grew up having I have deaf and hard of hearing parents. So my mother is hard of hearing, which means that she can hear, but she lost a great deal of her hearing when she was a kid because she had the measles in her ear. So she's not deaf. So the correct term for her would be hard of hearing. When she has a hearing aid on, she can hear very well. She can speak like you and I. When it's off, she can't really hear. My dad is completely deaf. My dad is completely deaf. So I was very immersed in like the deaf community, but they didn't raise me. My grandmother did. And so I think for me, like there was a barrier because when I was a kid, like I wasn't like being like forced to learn sign language. I wasn't being forced to like communicate with your parents because my parents had me when they were in college. Okay. So they were both 20, literally the same. They're like a few weeks apart. Wow. And, they had me, and my mother didn't want to have me. And it's not something I hold against her. I mean, she was 20 years old. But the deal was like, my grandmother said, okay, if you have her, I'll raise her as mine. And to this day, that has become our relationship, this sense of like, you know, I don't even call my biological mother mom. I call her by her first name. But that's because she wanted it like that. Right. And so back to the whole finding my voice, I think I needed to figure out who I was because of that. You know, there was so much like, the dichotomy between like having a relationship with the deaf and hard of hearing communities, but it wasn't so intimate that I could still communicate with them. Right. There was that barrier because I wasn't learning how to communicate with them. Like the only sign language I had learned at that time was through my dad because I had no choice because he can't talk, right? And so I think for me, like writing was a way to understand them, to understand the human parts of them, and also understand who I was as a kid, someone who was very bright. And you know, when you are a bright kid, there are things that are coming into your mind that you don't quite understand. Yep. And so I was observations taking exactly. Yeah. And like people used to say, like, you know, kids, they say things before they think it, right? And I was very much like that. Oh, okay. Boy, I was you was saying things that you had no filter. But in a respectful way. I was always a good curious kid. Yeah, I was very curious. Exactly. So I think, you know, I don't know, like it started with, I don't want to like ramble, but that was a part of the story. But also growing up in like stifling conditions in a neighborhood where it's deprived of like certain resources. And I wasn't always conscious of that. I think my grandmother, like, I guess, insulated me a bit well.
We hear that a lot. I think there's a lot of... in the media, we see this, and it's an honest portrayal sometimes, but portrayal that like Black kids know how hard it is growing up in certain environments or certain communities. But what we don't see often is the fact that like Black women, particularly, they will bend over backwards to make you feel comfortable. Some people didn't know how hard it was growing up.
Yeah, no, it's funny you say that because my sister, so I have twin sisters, they're 3 years younger than me. And my sister just sent me an audio a week ago, and she was like, I didn't know that we were poor. And she's not a conscious person like me. So hearing her say that, and to be honest, I wouldn't say that we were poor because my mother, my grandmother, they always had like decent, like, I would say we were like lower middle class, but my grandmother didn't want to leave the hood. Like that was what she was comfortable in. Yeah. But she was making decent money, but it was still on a low end, right? Right. But yeah, that's very true. I wouldn't say that I was like necessarily like, this is a bad neighborhood. No, like it was a lot of love. And that's the thing we don't see, I think, depicted as well. We see it sometimes, but we don't lean on the love and the communal part of growing up in an environment like that where everyone is just trying to survive. And like you said, I think the Black women are the pillars of those communities because we are the ones holding it together. We are the ones keeping the boys out of trouble, right? And so, and it was a paradox. It was a paradoxical situation. And on one hand, it was like we are deprived. And on the other hand, we are finding, you know, the joy and the love and the creativity, at least for me, within those spaces.
There's also a preservation of culture in those communities.
Yes.
And so, you know what I mean? And we see it like, you know, that's how I guess the unfortunate, which there's a lot of different unfortunate aspects of gentrification, but we're able to see that because a lot of times the culture of the community gets compromised. You know what I mean? As well as the small stores and restaurants, et cetera, those get compromised. We understand, you know, how it might benefit some people, but it doesn't tend to benefit our communities. My parents are from Gary. You know that, right? Do you know that?
Yeah, you told me that.
Yeah. Which surprises people. They're like, oh, you have roots in Gary? I'm like, my parents migrated from Gary to California.
Also, sorry, before we move on, I also want to add, because you back to the whole thing of like, you know, kids not knowing like they're growing up in a certain environment. I think for me, like it hit me when people around me started dying, like people that were closest to me. And we'll get into my uncle's story because he was probably like one of my biggest creative influences, but he's also mentioned in A Night at the Table, which is loosely inspired, very loosely, so we'll get into that later. But my uncle was murdered at 22 and I was 11 years old. But even before he was murdered, or I think his murder was like, it was like, it forced me to open my eyes. I didn't understand death. Like I was the one making the phone calls to the family at 11 years old. Like, you know, he passed away or he got killed. That's exactly what I said. I didn't know what that meant, right? So I'm the only one not really crying because I didn't understand. Like I didn't understand. It's traumatizing though.
Did you know that he was gone when you
I knew that he was gone, but I didn't know how to process it. And, you know, we can talk about that later in the interview, but this idea of like Black women dealing with secondhand trauma that I think doesn't really get discussed because we are all victims at one point or another, but we don't talk about the ripple effect that it has.
Yeah.
Even, you know, I'm the 11-year-old, I'm the one that has to call the family.
Right.
And I'm the one that has to help. Yeah, I don't want to go back into that day. But the point is, he kind of like opened like everything for me in terms of like the consciousness, because then after that I started slowly losing a lot of my childhood friends, and so I think that was
they started dying.
Okay. Yeah, they became either victims to the environment that they grew up in, whether that was you know, like gun violence or whether that was drugs or whether that was the police. Like it was happening like almost every year until I left for college.
Wow. Well, we actually are already at A Night at the Table. We're already there, believe it or not, you know. And I want to ask though, and I think we're kind of on the cusp of that conversation, is why horror for you?
So horror for me was an escape. I wasn't always conscious of it. I was a big fan of horror when I was a kid. But I do think it was kind of like a reaction to both trauma, but also the thing is trauma manifests in so many different ways. I think we don't realize. And I think like when I was a preteen kid going into preteen teenage years and so much stuff happening around me, we develop like a body of physical reaction to violence and things of that nature. So much so that, you know, even when like I remember my freshman year of college, I wouldn't answer the phone after like a certain time, even if it was my mom or my grandma. I wouldn't answer the phone because my heart would start beating really fast because I thought that it was about us losing somebody again. So I wouldn't answer. It was crazy. It was like, I was like, if they call back to back, I have to, but if they don't call a second time, it's not an emergency. So I had to like calm my heart rate. And so for me, it was an escape, but also there was a little rebellion in me going into the horror lane, or at least me liking horror at that time, because I grew up in a very religious family.
I was about to say, I was like, we wasn't allowed to watch that stuff. It was demonic.
Yeah. Exactly. My grandma was like, don't bring the devil in this house. So like, yeah, it was definitely
you opening doors.
Exactly. It was a little rebellion, you know, and that's actually a myth. Like, you know, for some films, yes, but it doesn't have to be horror. Any film can, you know, be.
That's true.
Yeah. But like at that time, it was like very much like, you're not supposed to be watching this. My grandma was always like, my mother didn't let me watch this, so you're not. There was no real explanation. It was just her mom didn't let her do it. So we're not doing that. So yeah, I would say it was a part escape, but then part rebellion. And then it eventually actually hosted a horror seminar when I was raising money for Black Butterflies, and I was surprised people actually pulled up. So I was like, I gotta actually explain, to these people why horror, right? And like one of the things I said that was how it started, but how it's going is now I'm able to be much more clever with using horror as a vehicle for activism. And I think first of all, my priority, which is the humanization of Black women, the humanization of Black people, but especially women. I think that we've been so misportrayed, for generations, right? And we're all, I think you have a lot of creatives and filmmakers and all of that are helping to unpack that. But I think horror is especially effective because it's in my opinion, it's the one genre where you don't have to really make a loud statement to make a statement.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be such an explicit thing that you say. You can be so clever with how you convey the message you want people to digest within horror,
right? Because
you're engaging them at the same time. And it sounds almost like psychological manipulation.
What do you mean when you say you're engaging them?
You're engaging them, you're entertaining them. You are keeping them on their toes. Both A Night at the Table and Black Butterflies is really centering Black women's pain and fears. Kind of like what Jordan Peele did with Get Out. He put a Black man's fear on the forefront, and we were able to see it manifest in all of these different ways. And so I'm doing the same thing, but for Black women.
Right.
You have maternal mortality, which is the social piece in Black Butterflies. But then, what I'm also doing is showing that here's the thing, racism is not just a black and white thing anymore. Black people are players, white people are players, sure. But this is a systemic and institutionalized issue. We live in a racialized society that is so complex that we don't realize how we're all players. We don't realize how we're all players. And so I'm telling my stories in a way that show hey, as Black people, not only do we have power in our action, but also we have to be more conscious about our own voices and the things that we do. And you see that play out in Black Butterflies, how one sister is subconsciously perpetuating this strength stereotype, we're okay, I'm okay, and it's no, you're not okay. And it's okay to not be okay. I am going to go get the doctor. Yeah,
I want you to unpack something you said Thursday, February 22nd. Just a couple days ago. Yes, you're right. You heard that right. Girl, you've been on Threads talking. You think I do my research?
That is a persona. No, I'm joking.
Well, the persona on Threads said.
I have been talking on Threads.
You have. I want you to unpack this. You said, sometimes we subconsciously reinforce beliefs that we were conditioned to believe without even realizing it. Ask more questions, folks. Talk to me about that. You're already there. I want you to unpack that a little bit, though.
It originally started with me seeing a woman say, she essentially was limiting herself, or she was looking at her having a side job next to her main job as a negative thing. And she was I used to be very nervous about getting caught. Am I going to get fired if they find out that I'm working a different job? And
right.
So I reposted that and essentially said, how about we invite a different point of view? You having another job is an extension or another layer to yourself, and you're also adding to your skill set. So now you can position yourself at your main job as someone with a diverse skill set and a diverse perspective, which now adds to your value. Leaders are well versed,
right?
So if you are now someone who has an added skill set, then they can look at you as more valuable, and you can position yourself in a way where you can get a promotion or a bigger pay, and you don't have to have the second job. So that was where it originally started, because I was sometimes we condition ourselves to believe the thing, and we don't realize how we are manifesting that reality.
Yes.
And it's a thin line with that belief, though, because sometimes people will use that for racism.
Absolutely.
I talk to my peers sometimes, and they'll ask, and that's the thing, ask questions, right? You can never be too sure about anything, which is why I love to read. I love to read, because I'm people who know a lot know that they don't know enough.
Exactly.
We know that there's so much to learn still. And so back to that idea, sometimes you'll hear people say it even within the spaces where we're talking about racism and prejudice, and they'll say, well, is this something that we're manifesting, or is this something that is we're thinking about it, or we're assuming that this is happening, and so it becomes a reality. And the thing is, I love the idea that they are thinking about it that deeply, because it invites, it invites them to take accountability in a sense of like, how am I thinking and receiving and digesting these messages that are coming at me from the world, the media, and all of that. But at the same time, you pair that with real research and education and all of that, and you see like the data shows that not just data, history, and also like things that happen now, but also the data shows that we still live in a racialized society. So if you think, there's this author of the book called So You Want to Talk About Race, Ijeoma Oluo. I may be mispronouncing her name, but she says, if a person of color thinks it's about race, then it's about race.
Right.
And the thing is, it's not to say like, oh, you are making it about race. Even if I'm not making it about race, it's about race. Because we live in a racialized society, right? So that's really where that thought came from. Like sometimes, yes, we subconsciously create, this reality. But again, like I said, there's a thin line. There's a thin line. Yeah. Sometimes the reality is the reality, but then other times we have a little bit of power to change that.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Well, speaking of power to change that, I want to talk about the Professional Filmmakers Academy. I want to talk about one thing I didn't know about you. You were just talking about how you did the, what was it, a horror seminar? What was it you did? You did
so that was a part of my crowdfunding campaign for Black Butterflies. It was like an incentive.
It was an incentive that you offered.
It was like over a year. It wasn't recent, but.
That's still that seed of being a teacher, you know what I mean? And being an instructor.
Thank you, because I wouldn't have remembered that. Thought about it like that.
That's directly connected. I'm hearing that and I'm like, oh, it makes complete sense. So for those that don't know, the Professional Filmmakers Academy is an accelerator program that equips filmmakers with the skills, tools, and resources, y'all, to lay the foundation for a successful filmmaking career. Talk to me about what possessed you, horror, to it's corny. Okay. To take this on. This is a wonderful undertaking, but it's huge.
It is huge.
Yeah.
It is very huge, but the thing is, everything I do is much bigger than me. And it's the same thing that started with like my filmmaking career. I went in as an actress. I went in as an actor who wanted to create opportunities for myself.
Right.
And I am so committed to excellence, so committed to the craft that the opportunity just became much bigger than me. And once I saw that it was becoming bigger than me, I didn't run from it, or I didn't say like, well, I didn't still keep it to myself. Right. I was like, well, now this is for you. Like my lead actress got her first lead actor nomination because of A Night at the Table. So once I started seeing that I was creating opportunities for other people, I was like, okay, Tamara, I know you said, you got a little 10 years before this happens, but God said right now, today. God said you are ready today. Yeah. So that's really how it started, as me listening to God and like me listening to the voices and my intuition, and also me not discrediting myself as an expert in my field. And the thing is, people don't realize like being a filmmaker is not just about being a creative. Yeah. You want to succeed in any business, you have to know the business. Right. You got the show, but you don't have the business. Why they call it show business. And I think so often that part of being a filmmaker, being a creative, gets left out. My entire career, even when I was a professional at HBO, was all a strategy to get here.
Can you talk about that? I want to land there because I think I know confidently a lot of filmmakers, specifically even Black filmmakers, may not understand strategy in our overall, in our overall career goals, whether that's a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, or, your life goals. Yeah. How could you, what advice do you have for people to really honing in on their why for every step they're taking career-wise?
Well, you have to ask yourself a lot of questions. And, I listen, I'm a fan of your podcast. So I listened to your episodes and I heard Reggie say something like it takes 2 to 3 years to make a short film. And I will push back on that a little bit because I think it takes 2 years to make.
Ooh, tension. I love it.
Look, conflict, drama.
Ooh, drama.
I agree with him though, but I'll tell you why I'm pushing back a little bit, because it goes back to the why. Okay. It goes back to the why, and it goes back to asking yourself, what do you want from that project? Because a great example is A Night at the Table. I wrote A Night at the Table in a month or less.
Wow.
But the idea itself had come to me a year or two prior.
And at DC Black Film Festival, because I do my research, you're like, it's like little Tamara, and you're just like, oh yeah, you know what, I'm gonna look for this. She didn't say it like that. Her voice has way more gravitas, but whatever. But she was younger, so she was like, but you were saying to him that you were planning to look for distribution, that people will see it. And I looked at your timeline, and I'm like, that couldn't have been a year later, less than a year later.
For A Night at the Table?
Yeah.
I said that?
You said that. It's on the tube. You said that.
I said that I was planning to look for distribution.
Yes, you did. You told him Dean Rogers is his name. You told him.
Okay.
Yep. You said you said to him that your plans were for distribution.
Well, look, if I said it, I believe me.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be so far ahead in the future sometimes.
But it didn't take that long.
Right. So here's the thing. A Night at the Table, we can't go into all of the details of like how that came to be and how that came to exist in terms, because the thing is, there are seeds that were being planted that I didn't know.
Okay, got you.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
I was a director in college. I was directing theater. I won awards in college directing theater. And then, you know, I'm working at HBO, so I'm getting a sense of like what it feels like to be and the person like behind the scenes looking at people making the decisions. I knew Insecure was Insecure before it was called Insecure, right? So those are all things seeping into my subconscious. And so now you have Tamara, fresh out of acting school, trying to create a reel for herself. That's all I was trying to
create
do.
A reel.
But the Tamara who had studied screenwriting for 3-4 years, who was a double major in English, who had excelled in writing her entire life, said, hold that thought, we gotta make sure the script is right. I already had the skill set though. You know what I mean? I wasn't like, I didn't necessarily go to school for film or screenwriting, but I was always a writer. That was a thing I had, that was my side hustle, speaking of side hustle. I was like doing resumes for people as a side gig, right? So I'm saying all of that to say, the reason why I was pushing back on Reggie was because you have to ask yourself what you want from that project, right? You have to ask yourself like, hey, for me at that time, it was just a reel. It was just about me.
Yeah.
But because the story was so good and people started reading it, they said, no. We can't stop there. You got to do this and you got to do that. So at that time, I didn't have like with Black Butterflies. Black Butterflies was probably my most intentional film. A Night at the Table was one of those things that it took on a life of its own. And instead of like me seeing the train run away, I hopped on it and I got a hold of it and I became the driver of that train.
That's the key. Can you talk about that a little bit more? Unpack becoming the driver of the train and being able to really keep your ears to the streets and understanding, oh wait, this project, I got to actually give this some time.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. A lot of people who maybe you already know because you did the research, but I simultaneously produced 2 films at the same time.
Yep.
A Night at
you
the
told
Table,
that to Dean a weekend apart.
a weekend apart. I was like a zombie. I was not sleeping. Thank God I'm still alive because I was driving people home on 2 hours or less of sleep. I was sleeping at HBO at 2 a.m. and waking up at 4 a.m. to go shoot. Right? That's the hustle culture. We in a soft culture. Don't look at me because I ain't doing that again. But at that time, I was hungry. You know what I mean? I was hustling. And in terms of getting on the moving train, like you have to look at yourself like a commodity. You have to look at yourself like an asset in your project.
Right.
You have to know your voice. And that's why knowing what you want and also knowing the story you want to tell is important, because when people got excited about my story, it happened again in Black Butterflies, and we probably won't have time to revisit that to tape. But here's the thing: when you are first excited about your story and you put so much work into it, work doesn't necessarily have to translate the 1, 2, 3 years. It depends on your background, your expertise. But you have to look at yourself again as a business, because I knew that my ultimate goal at that time was I want to get a rep, I want to get an agent, I want to get a lead role on a bigger project. So I have to show people that I can play a lead actress. I have to show people that I'm not also just I can just do rom-com, because that was a rom-com I did the weekend after that. I can also play the background and give it nuance and give it complexity.
Right.
And this 2 line, and I mean, all of my takes were 1 take, by the way, so don't judge me too hard. But people were like, no way. And I'm like, yes way. We were pressed. I mean, you know, you're a producer. But like, pressed for time and all of that. But yes, you have to that's why knowing what you want from your project is important. And in terms of the Reggie comment, the reason why I say it doesn't always have to take 2 to 3 years, because like me, if you just want it for a reel or you just want it for as a portfolio,
you have to know what your intention is.
Exactly. Then it doesn't have to take that long, because now you just really need something to be visually, aesthetically pleasing, right? It's not always going to happen in a way of how it happened with me, as like, oh, you know, I just did it in a month and 2 months later, like, first of all, I had planned to do probably 4 films that year. It just happened to be that I shot for what they say, shoot for the moon and you can land in the stars. That's what happened. My goals were extremely ambitious. And because they were so ambitious, I didn't quite meet them, but I still landed somewhere in that galaxy where I was able to now form my own, timeline of like what I wanted from this. And I'm like, okay, I wasn't planning to be a director for another 10 years.
Yeah.
But God said, now is the time. This is what's happening. I was winning award. I was like, it was crazy because I wasn't prepared, or I didn't see it that way. So to the question of like Dean saying like, or me telling Dean, I plan for distribution, I think it became a thing where I was like, well, since it's getting so much traction, I wanted to live somewhere.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. We are almost at time, believe it or not.
I know.
So I want you to unpack though the Academy and what we can expect.
Yeah, so the Professional Filmmaker Academy essentially is a proven system that I've created for myself.
Proven system.
Period. A proven system that I've created for myself that has been one of the biggest contributing factor for all of my film success. So even the story of A Night at the Table, right, being somewhat of like a chance, but it was still a lot of thought and preparation that went into that. I even read A Night at the Table now and I'm like, wow, like this was really good. As someone who didn't believe they were a screenwriter, you wrote a really great screenplay. I'm reading it now as a reference for my feature and I'm like, wow, you gotta,
it's good.
You gotta
it's really
beat that.
Good. It's really good. I was scared. I was like, and that was my first time seeing you, and you are in Black Butterflies, but like seeing you act. And so I was like, ooh, Tamara. I was like, Tamara, okay, girl, I see you.
It's a proven system for success, for a successful project. And it includes, first of all, you mentioned resources, right? Because I know a lot of people look at it and like, are you going to help me find some money? Yes, I am. But guess what? Money doesn't stop in the creative arenas.
Right.
There's so much untapped resources in the business sector. Like I have literally gotten business grants, that I was able to use to keep myself afloat as a creative because I created an LLC for my production company. You know what I mean? Like that would not have been accessible to me had I not have formed that LLC. Right. So when I started realizing the relationship between being a business and being a creative and how it was helping me, you know what I mean? Also, people look at you more as a professional when they see like you have all of your ducks in a row. I understand what errors and omissions is, but essentially it is not just a course that I'm providing, but it's also a community that I'm building. I don't want to expose everything now because I haven't announced it yet, but let's just say, it basically takes you from the conception of your project to pitching, but also persevering as you're going through that process, because you need to have a strong mind to see your project through and see it through successfully. And I have never, I told someone this by accident, just like, they say, talk your stuff. I have never failed. I have turned all of my failures into wins. And it wasn't by accident. That wasn't by accident. That was by design. And that was through the design and the formulas and the strategies that I created. And sometimes with Reggie, to piggyback off Reggie, he said something about patience. That does mean patience. Yes. Black Butterflies, so y'all know, Black Butterflies took 3 years to become Black Butterflies. I wrote that film over 3 times and revised it almost over 20. That was the Black Butterflies y'all see now was not the Black Butterflies that it was when it was just an idea. Yeah. But it started with a small goal. Oh, I just want to get in a Tribeca. I just want to get a grant, something quick to make. And then it became one of those things like, oh, y'all denied me? Oh, now I got to prove to y'all that y'all were supposed to give me this money. And I'm very competitive, so... Yeah.
I got you. As pertains to Black women, we're going to get to hurt, heal, joy. What hurts you? What do you want to heal? And what brings you joy? As pertains to Black women.
As it pertains to Black women. Oh, goodness. So I'm speaking in general.
You can say Black women filmmakers if you want to be specific.
Well, no, I mean, like, I'm not speaking just about myself. So I'm speaking about...
You can speak about yourself, too.
Hurt, heal, joy. This one is hard. When you say hurt, like, what do I want to...
What hurts? What's hurt?
What hurts? Oh, I see. Oh, girl. What's hurting Black women, I think... So there are so many things at play against us, and I just love how we persevere and we're so strong. But I hate that word has become a weapon against us, and the very thing that helped us survive is a thing that's being used against us to suppress us. And it's all mind play, it's all trickery. It's to make us think that we aren't supposed to be where we are, but we are. We're supposed to take up this space. What's hurting me is the lack of the scarcity mindset. I think that some of us have. When I like to be inclusive, I don't like to point fingers. So even when I'm criticizing my sisters, I'm including myself in that because they're a representation of me. So when I say stuff like, having a scarcity mindset, feeling like I'm the only one that can be here. Right. And it's just not true.
Come on.
My New York community, I mean, you were in New York. There was so much of that community that fed me. There was so much of that community that helped push me. And it was because I was seeing other women like me do it.
Yes.
And some of them you're friends with. You know what I mean? And they inspired me. And I tell them every time I see them. And they're like, oh, girl, shit. I'm like, no, you inspired me. They're like, oh, but you're doing so much. And I'm like, yeah, but guess what? You were part of the reason why I felt like I could.
Come on. So,
yeah, let's say joy. What brings me joy about Black women is our confidence. Because we hear say strength, perseverance, resilience. We know that.
Right.
It is embedded in our blood to be all of those things because we had to keep our families together. Okay, you know what I mean. We had to keep the community afloat while they were attacking our men.
Yeah.
So the fact that we are able to remain confident even when all of these forces are at play that tells us like you are not good enough, and sometimes that's our own community, telling us like you're not good enough, and this person is better than you, and you need to conform and look like this because of all of that. And it's the reason why I'm so intentional about casting. You know what I mean? Because I think like a lot of people are like, why didn't you put yourself in a lead role there, and why didn't you? No, I'm not going to put myself in a lead role if it's not my story to tell.
Yes.
So that's what brings me joy. The fact that I was confident to do that. Because that took a lot, not for me, but for people to look at it and be like, well, okay, why didn't you choose this person? She has more credits. It wasn't her story to tell at that time. You know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. I know I'm like going on and on and
on. We didn't get to heal.
Heal? What do I want to see heal? I think, so I'll speak for the Black community in general, not just Black women, because I think sometimes we do tend to like isolate ourselves and make ourselves like there's a sense of individualism and like Black women, Black men, and Black, we're all a community. And I think I would love to see more of us communing and helping each other and building each other up and not feeling like there's just a little bit of space for a little bit of us and perpetuating this idea of like elitism and even in Hollywood it happens, and people who are even in an independent space, I'll have people tell me like you're not like them, or like like you're here and this is your space. So why are you, even with the Professional Filmmaker Academy, like there was a point where I had to ask my therapist, I was like, am I giving away my sauce? Because there were people like, you're about to do all of this. And so I asked
Scarcity
myself,
mindset.
Yeah. And I'm like, am I giving away my sauce? And then I realized like, there's so much more to me and in me. And also too, people are going to be learning with me as I grow.
Yes.
You know what I mean? All of the skills and everything that I'm learning, I'm putting it in there for other people, because at the end of the day, I don't want to say we're all we got, because I think all of us we should be communing with each other, but it starts with our own community and ourselves. So yeah, I would like more of us to be coming together. I mean, you know that. I had a Business of Filmmaking event where I brought people together and it was a full house. And that's where we met, right?
No, we met before that. We met a couple days before that. You invited me to that.
Yeah. Okay, exactly. So yeah, exactly. I invited you. Like, here we are.
Yeah, here we are.
On the couch.
Here we are. On the couch. Tamara, before you go, how can people follow you, support you?
First of all, I have a free resource right now for filmmakers. And you can find that on filmsmakemoney.com. And it's going to be, the first resource is a list of the first things I did to make my film a success. You can download it completely free. So filmsmakemoney.com. You can find me on all socials at Tamara X Shanice, TamaraXShanice. And yeah, I do prefer email. I'm still old school, there's a lot of little creepers in the DMs.
Listen.
If you serious, email me.
Thank you so much, Tamara. This has been
welcome.
Awesome. This has been awesome. Thank you. Did you bring a poem?
I did.
Share a poem with us. Show us what you got. Show us what you got.
I did. I was like, I don't want to steal too much of y'all time. It's not in here, y'all, but this is my first acting.
Oh,
This is my acting notebook. I
it
want to bring
happens to
some
match.
goodies. Just so y'all see like how it started. I'm like, I need to, what do you call it? Preserve that somehow. All right. So this is from my coming poetry book. I feel like you're getting all the exclusives. I have not announced any of this to the world yet. But my poetry book, I'm not going to drop the name yet. Because I still have to trademark it and whatnot.
I got you.
But anyway, so there comes a time when people will see you, feel you, touch you, and not know that you're not there. People will hear the growl of your heart. It's hunger swallowing the sparkle from your eyes, yet they will expect for you to feed them. That time will come when you will arrive, yet you will be absent. And that is when you will know that it is time to go back in and heal. You will not apologize for this. And that one is called When Outside Becomes Harmful. Go in.
Outside becomes harmful. Go in.
Can I do one more? Can I sneak in one more? Okay. Okay. I sometimes dream of leaving footprints that lead back to me in case no one notices when I'm gone. Because here my soul lingers longer than my body, and I surmise that's why no one phones. I am felt, but I am not seen while swimming in the cavity of darkness. I guess it's the essence of my presence that echoes I am still here. Yet there are days where I consider what it would be like to simply leave because I am grieving in silence, and it is very hard to breathe there. And that one is called The Wellness Check.
The wellness check, the strong friend. It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that, Tamara. Ooh, y'all, this has been another episode of Inside Out Podcast. Before you go, make sure you subscribe. I said it in the beginning. I'm going to say it again. Make sure you follow, leave comments. Let us know. I know this episode is going to resonate with people. I might have to bring you back for more.
I know. I'm like, it's so much I didn't cover, but I love that.
Yeah, it's good, though. It's good. We got through a lot. Thanks, y'all, for tuning in to Inside Out Podcast. Peace out.
Bye.
Wait. Before you go, don't forget to like this episode. Give it a thumbs up or a heart, depending on where you're watching or listening, and comment. I will continue the conversation with you in the comments, and be sure to subscribe wherever you watch or listen to Inside Out Podcast. You can catch Inside Out Podcast on YouTube. Of course, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Amazon Music, or iHeartRadio. And y'all, that is not it. If you really love you some Inside Out Podcast, there is a Patreon community just for you. For only $15 per month, you can join the Patreon as a member. And every 3 months, I will send you some Inside Out Podcast swag, y'all. Yes, straight from the Inside Out Podcast store, just for showing us some love. You can, of course, follow Inside Out Podcast on Instagram and TikTok. Thank you for showing us love, and stay tuned for the next episode. Okay.